Okay, we're on the air. So that was that meditation was the lesson for yesterday from the course. It seemed it spoke to me as I was looking here at it. But the lesson today then adds to it and says, "I give my life to God to guide today." So I was thinking, I sent out a little message earlier this morning concerning this, and it's just the idea that we are always in the presence of God, always in the presence of good, if you will, however you want to say it, whatever you want to call it, and that presence is always in us. And because it just can't be separated. We are all a part of this this oneness. And so the practice for today is like this simple practice of just remembering. Just remember that we are in the presence and the presence is in us, and then allow that presence to guide us in whatever it is we do. And what that means is that there was a very early lesson learned in the course was that you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything. Doesn't mean there's nothing to do. There is something to do. But the fact is we don't have to do. In other words, we are not forced to do anything. We may go through our lives thinking that we have to do this and we have to do that, but we don't. We've got to come back to that position where we realize that what we do is by our own choice. And so then our task just becomes finding out what it is that there is to do. And that always lines up with what it says over the door when you walk in out there, proper service. That proper service is doing the right thing for the right reason at the right time. And I can't figure that out in my personality. I can't figure that out in my isolation. I can't figure that out in my self-centeredness. I need to remember that I am in the presence of good, and that good will guide me to goodwill. Goodwill being what's best for everyone involved. And so what we find is that actually where this all begins, and this may be familiar if you've come here at all before. It's one of the things I always talk about. Some people get mad, but it's forgiveness. Sometimes we think that there are things that have occurred in our lives that are beyond the pale. They are unforgivable. These things have occurred in our lives that there's just no question. It's just too bad. This can't possibly be forgiven. And of course, as we know, if we're watching the world, the material world, we see things every day that we could judge as being unforgivable. And so, but that idea of forgiveness is the idea that we see something bad, that something bad occurs, and we kind of say, well, it's okay. It's okay, I'm going to let it go. The forgiveness that says, well, you really were very bad, but I'm just going to kind of shine it on. I'm going to, I kind of like you, so I'm going to let it go. And then if I'm really magnanimous, I would say, I really don't like you, but I'm going to try to let it go anyway. And then we have the phrase that we've heard many, many times is that I'll forgive, but I won't forget. And unfortunately, true forgiveness cannot occur unless we get to that point of forgetfulness. And I'm going to talk about that in the various levels of how this works today, because I think it's so important for us to build and be able to live this happy and fulfilled life, which I assume that we're all looking for. Sometimes it seems like I'm not looking for it. Sometimes it seems like I'm looking for trouble. I'm looking for conflict, and then of course that's what's found. So there are some levels in this forgiveness, and there are some. And by the way, this is part of the series that we've started some weeks ago on happiness, and actually a scientific approach to happiness. And this is one of the components to a happy life, is this ability to forgive. And actually it turns out that we can live a happier life even if we practice the kind of forgiveness that is kind of more on the surface. Even if we practice the forgiveness that's not forgetfulness. We can be happier than we would be if we just walk around with continual regret and resentment looping around in our minds. So first, forgiveness is not necessarily reconciliation. Meaning you can forgive without reestablishing a relationship the way it was before. I've heard this years ago, and then I stole it and I keep using it. You can love somebody from across the street. You don't have to go to dinner with them. You don't have to live with them. You don't have to hang out in any way. You don't have to text them. They don't have to be your Facebook friend. But still, we can extend love. And, forgiveness leads to love. And so when the Buddha talked about this, he says the first thing that happens is understanding. That we have an understanding, and this is one of the things that has to be established. I have to be able to, when I begin this forgiveness process, I have to be able to come to some kind of understanding as to what the motivation may have been for the other person to have done the thing, or the group of people to have done the things that I'm now seeing as a problem. And in order to do that, I have to kind of try to put myself in their position. And here's another thing that we know we're in trouble when we observe somebody else's behavior and we say, I would never do anything like that. Now, I think I've heard it come out of my mouth before, that phrase. I'm sure I've heard one or two of you say it. But this, right off the bat, what I'm doing is I'm separating myself from others. And really, the fact of the matter is, given the right circumstances, we are pretty much capable of anything. I know some things are so shocking we say no, but we don't know. We don't know the backstory. We don't know. But in any event, if we can just allow for the fact. Well, let me just put this out there for a second. If you think about that thing or that series of things that you most regret in your life. If you get a picture of that, maybe there's something that you would never tell anybody, that you've never, or one time you thought you would never tell anybody. That thing that you think is just the worst. It could actually not even be a deed, but it could just be a thought. But if you can come to this feeling within that you would like to be totally forgiven for that. Is that attractive? What's that look like? What's that feel like? And then we can then perhaps get to the place where we can extend that forgiveness. So the first thing is understanding. To understand that they're just like us. Right now they're acting differently, but they're just like us. We come to an understanding. And then the Buddha says from understanding, once we got a point of understanding and we can think maybe we know what the motivation was. And by the way, I'm just going to cut to the chase about it. The motivation is always fear. The motivation for all these bad acts is always fear in one form or another. People are afraid, and so they do things. Thinking they're going to protect themselves, thinking that it's a defense. So it's always fear. And so if I can come to that understanding, then the next thing that happens is compassion. Meaning I can relate, because I can relate to fear. I can relate to feeling in danger in the material world. I can relate to feeling threatened. I can relate to feeling separate and alone. I can relate to feeling a sense of lack, that I don't have enough. And so if I can I know what that feels like. I know that what it feels like to experience those things. So now I'm establishing more of a common ground. Now, so the next thing, the thing about this is about like half of compassion is knowing what it feels like. half of compassion. It actually means shared suffering. But the process of compassion has to step, in order for it to really be helpful, I've got to go another step further. And I have to step from common suffering into a state of mind where I see that both of us can be free of whatever condition it was that caused the act, the event, the thought. To go from understanding to compassion to feeling what it's like, to go further to see that all of us could be free of whatever it is that caused it. And that is love. And this is what the Buddha says. That's the point where it's love. When it becomes love, then forgiveness has happened. And what we say is our working definition of love is the ability to feel connected to another and the desire for only good to come to them. So we go from a point of wanting revenge. We go from a point of at least wanting to see some sort of retribution. Many of us, listen, when I say people, I don't want to separate myself from them, but we can get into a mindset where we kind of have an idea that other people's bad behavior, we're suffering at the hands of other people's bad behavior, but they will get their just desserts later. Somewhere down the line, there will be a punishment for them for doing these things to us and probably to others. This is small satisfaction. This is really not anything to build any kind of an enjoyable life on. And really what it actually says is then, of course, we know that we haven't been perfect, so there must be some kind of punishment coming to us too. And here's the punishment. The punishment is cause and effect. Cause and effect is in operation in the material world. When we do something, there is a consequence. When we don't do something, there is a consequence. And so this actually then, because this is really, you could say it's actually divine justice. Because when we do something, stuff occurs. And we feel the repercussions of those things. What this practice of forgiveness does is it somewhere along the line cuts through. It cuts through and offers safety. It offers healing. It offers love and an end to the suffering caused by whatever it was that we were holding in our minds. Forgiveness is not justification. So even though we go to this place in our mind where we can understand the other person and that we can be compassionate and then give love, it doesn't mean saying that the thing was okay. It doesn't mean saying that whatever hurtful thing happened, that's all right. It's not all right. The thing itself was not all right. The idea is to move past it. So the word and the sign didn't get changed. I'm not judging, I'm just saying. But it was supposed to say give first. Give on one side and first on the other, so it'd be first give. And the word, the forgive, the root means to give first. So it's kind of strange when you think about how does forgive, how does that mean? Well, I take it, and this is just me doing an interpretation. Nobody told me this. But it to me, then forgiveness means to take my mind back to the state it was in before the offense occurred. So I want to go back to the place I was in my mind before they did it to me. You know what? My phone has been going crazy for the past, it's been going crazy for some time. I'm getting 20 texts a day from the Democratic National Committee alerting me to all of the horrible things that are about to happen unless I give them $20. Well, now, obviously, they're not sending me texts because they don't know me. I mean, I've given them money, right? I've given them money. But this, so continually this is like, and it's being pointed out to me, all of the horrible things. And I'm sure that the Republican National Committee is sending out plenty of texts to a bunch of other people too, pointing out all of the horrible things and all of the reasons why the world is going to totally fall apart if you don't give them $20, but they're probably asking for $1 million. I'm just saying. So, okay. So the problem is I do not want to respond to alarming texts because it gets me off of the place where what happens is, well, obviously there's always a villain in one of these texts. This guy said this, get rid of this guy, fight against that. So what I've done now is I look through the text, and if they happen to send me one that doesn't say fight this, defeat this, get rid of that, then I go ahead and send them a little bit of money. Less than I did before, but I sent a little bit of money. But any of them that say anything about conflict, about being in a war, I don't respond to them. Now, you know what? They're not noticing. Here's what's going on. Here's what's going on. Because this is effective. And this is really the point of the talk, is it is effective to get people stirred up, all riled up and get them in conflict, because the conflict distracts us from what's really going on. Now, and this is on different levels. What's really going on is this status quo, and whatever side you're on, you can't think that's good, right? But underneath that, which is really what's important and really what I'm talking about here, is it doesn't have anything to do, see, the quality of our life really doesn't have anything to do with what political party is in power. The quality of our life has nothing to do with who's mayor, who's governor, who's president. The quality of our life has everything to do with what we do with our life. But so these things are distractions that keep us from actually living life. These things are all distractions that keep us from interacting with one another, because wait, now, if I find out that you're a Republican, there might be some consequences. My mind goes there because, look, they're telling me all these things, right? So, and we are caught up in it. We've got warring television networks. And you get in a camp, and what I'm saying is that keeps us from actually being happy. That keeps us from, because it's this thing that's constantly in our face. It's a threat, and every one of those emails, it's a threat. It's something to cause fear. It feeds on the attitude of lack that there, so forgiveness cuts through it. Forgiveness puts it as so one of the practices that I do is I look at the villain of the day, and they're different depending on your point of view. Everybody's got somebody who's their villain of the day. I look on the villain of the day, and what I want to do is, and this is going to sound so corny, but this really is the practice. I want to see the face of Christ on John Boehner. I know. Whoever it is, whoever your guy is, right? Whoever your girl is that you're upset with right now, to see the face of Christ. This is forgiveness, because we're seeing past and through all of these distractions to what's really going on. Now, yes, there's a conspiracy. I have a good friend of mine who from time to time gets paranoid. He was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic, and he actually got off his medication through the practice of the Course in Miracles. But still, from time to time, the paranoia comes up. And he will call me up and tell me that he thinks there's a conspiracy going on. And I always remind him, there is. And you're part of it. Because we are all conspiring at some level. And it's right below the surface. You can just about touch it. Right below the surface, there's a place where we're all conspiring to keep this madness going on. To keep ourselves distracted, because we really are afraid of the truth. We really are afraid of what we did in the meditation, that we're afraid of the presence of God. Because we have somewhere buried in our mind, we have decided that there's something wrong with us. There's some place in us that is unforgivable. And so we really try to push that presence away. But the fact is, what the Course says is, you're innocent. Can I tell you that this morning? You are innocent. You are innocent. And your brother, your sister, your neighbor, the Syrians, they are innocent. Oh, no. Yes. Sinless. Innocent. And what I'm talking about now is at the core, at the bedrock of reality, that we are spirit. That we all together are one spirit. So, forgiveness. To forgive and to forget. To go back to the state of mind that I was in before the offense occurred. And so it's a practice that it doesn't really matter if we do it perfectly. We actually, as long as we're here in the world, as long as we see the world we see, we probably won't do it perfectly. We do it perfectly for a minute. But the idea is, what I want to do is well, just think about it. If someone close to you does something today or did something, let's say they did it yesterday, because that's always where the ego wants to go. Goes back to the past. Wants to go back to the past and take some offense that occurred in the past. Just think about it. Before the offense occurred, what were you thinking about? How were you feeling? Well, maybe perhaps you had plans to do something with the other person. The practice of forgiveness is to put ourselves back in that state before they said the insulting thing, before they did the hurtful thing. Now the problem is, when we get back to that state, where we were mad at somebody else. We had some other resentment in our mind somewhere. I mean, maybe not that minute, but if we think about it for a second, there was something else going on. And this is one of the things that the Course says too. We're never upset for the reason we think we're upset. So actually, what this true forgiveness means is to take ourselves back to the state of mind we were in before the first offense occurred. That's a long time ago. So think about it as a solution right now, and I would just talk about the material world for a minute. What would happen